I'm joined by Querida Anderson, who's the editor-in-chief of BioPharm Insight. Good afternoon, and thanks so much for joining me.
Good afternoon. Nice to be here.
Well, both of the conferences here in San Francisco are wrapping up, and it's been a brutal day in the equity markets. We've seen quite a sell-off in the biotech sector, but you've been attending both of these conferences for several years now. What have you noticed in terms of change?
Yeah, so, people tend to think of the JP Morgan conference as a way to set like a positive tone for the investors for the rest of the year. And this year was really no different. Despite, the biopharm sector starting off very roughly this year, people still thought that the JP Morgan conference that's ongoing right now would kind of change that around, at least to a certain degree. And that has really not been the case. Now, that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. Honestly, we could just be seeing a sort of a normalization of the biopharm sector's valuation. So what I mean by this is, post the public and political outcry over drug pricing and post China's market issues and post the muted sentiment from JP Morgan, we might just be seeing companies with their actual true potential showing and the true valuation showing.
Querida, it's very interesting you mentioned that. I just attended a conference panel here at the BioTech Showcase, and they're talking about whether or not biotech is in a bubble. But as you mentioned, there are a lot of things that affect the overall equity market, but in terms of biotech, many people are saying that the fundamentals remain the same. Now, in terms of within the biotech sector, what's on your radar? We've been hearing a lot about immuno-oncology, as well as innovations taking place throughout the industry, but what's on your radar?
Right, I mean, that's the key. I think, when I start thinking about this normalization of the biopharma sector and seeing the true valuation of companies, what I can say is, forecasting is a really tough business to be in. So I'll tell you what I hope for. I hope that with all of this, we just see a refocusing of energy and resources on true innovation and not just throwing out terms like breakthrough and transformative and game changer, and the list goes on, but really concentrating on the science and what works and what doesn't work. And, big and large and mid-cap pharma companies are going to continue to look to grow through acquisitions. This is not a new model. Hopefully, instead of just focusing on companies that bring in, immediate and near-term revenues, they will also look to companies that can really lay the foundation for long-term innovation and really have a true growth pipeline with them. So this does open the opportunity for small caps, and they might begin to see exits sooner rather than later.
And it's interesting that you mentioned drug pricing. This is an election year, so of course we'll be keeping an eye on that. But you also mentioned some of the types of deals that are common in this space. Usually the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference is a time when many journalists as well as investors and consumers overall are watching out for the latest headlines as well as deals. But it's been fairly quiet, and we're already all heading out of the gates, leaving San Francisco. So heading into this new year, what will you be looking for overall?
Yeah, again, I think it just go back to that real innovation, right? Genomics and proteomics really opens up a vast array of opportunities for us. Gene therapy is a very interesting field. It has always seemed to be on the cusp of a breakthrough and never really getting over that last hurdle. We still don't have a drug approved here for gene therapy. So hopefully we'll start to see that. There was, some really good information from Spark Therapeutics last year. Hopefully we'll see a first gene therapy drug approved this year. As you mentioned, immunotherapies, that's a really hot area. Any drug that taps the immune system, that's going to work well in cancer, autoimmune indications, as well as the antiviral sector. So those areas are really good areas to focus on. A good strategy really for any company, particularly a small cap company, is to kind of use that Star Trek mentality to boldly go where no man has gone before. You can't just be following the hottest trends right now. You really have to look for the next hottest target so that you can position yourself well in the long run. And again, that is going to come from the genomics, proteomics revolution, the immunotherapy revolution. And beyond that, just a focus on really thinking through your plan. And what I mean by that is, getting as much of an understanding of the scientific rationale of a drug before you jump into clinical development. That's key. Once you do get into clinical development, designing your trials, not just to show that a drug works to a statistical degree, but also to show that the therapy has a clinical relevance. All too often we hear our sources say, yes, this drug is going to get approved, it's going to reach the market, but the trial wasn't really designed well, and I don't know what to do with this data and how to apply it in the real world setting. So that level, that focus on those kinds of details is what's really going to make a small cap company stand out. That's what's going to propel the industry as a whole forward. And hopefully that's also what's going to change the public sentiment of the industry, particularly right now, as you mentioned, with the hullabaloo around the drug pricing, which we do need to get under control and figure out a long-term strategy for that as well.
Well, Querida, thank you so much for insight and an interesting analogy for the rest of the year. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Remy. Nice to be here.